What's up guys, it's Paraly5er here and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be giving you 100 tips for you to play grounded. This might be quite a long video, so strap yourselves in. I guarantee you that at least one tip I give you in this video will help you play grounded and it'll be something you never knew before. Tip number 1 is to put berry chunks and pupa on the drying racks. This is a pretty obvious one, but if you didn't know, when you craft berry leather and pupa leather, it costs a lot of chunks. But if you put them on the jerky racks in the game, it actually is a one-to-one conversion. You just have to wait a little bit of time. Tip number 2 is that you can dry plant fiber into dry grass using the jerky racks. That's right. If you put plant fiber on a jerky rack, it will eventually dry out into dry grass. So if for some reason you live somewhere that doesn't have a lot of dry grass and you need a bunch, you can put this on the jerky rack. Tip number 3, you can get to the upper yard without a bomb. Now this is an obvious one that I've covered before. You just have to do some parkour by the Frankenline and you can very easily get to the upper yard. Tip number 4, use spicy safety if you're struggling to kill stuff. This is an obvious one, but spicy safety increases your defense from certain types of attacks and can be very useful against roly-polies and black ox beetles if you're trying to kill them to progress the game. To get this, all you have to do is eat some spicy shards. Tip number 5 is to put a trail marker at your base. This is a pretty obvious one, but if you build a trail marker at your base, you can set an icon to it and you'll never lose your base. You'll always know exactly where it is, and it means you don't have to place a marker on your base every time you're trying to go home. Tip number 6 is to make zip lines at your base so you can travel across the entire map quickly. I highly recommend you do this as early in the game as possible, as it's very useful to fast travel across the entire yard. Tip number 7, killing the ants increases the number of eggs in the nest. That's right, if you kill all the red ants inside of the nest, it will end up spawning more ant eggs in the nest to repopulate it. So, if you need a lot of eggs to craft a lot of bombs, this is what I recommend doing. Just kill every ant. Tip number 8, hot deposit into nearby chests. This is a feature in the game that you can open up your wheel and you can use the hot deposit feature. It'll deposit any items that are stackable to nearby chests. I do warn you, this will stack weapons as well. So what you can do is go into a chest and turn off the ability to stack into specific chests so that you don't accidentally stack things you're not trying to stack.
Tip 9. Holding X on a chest will stack from your inventory into that specific chest.
Number 10. Make sure you scan grass planks and weed stems. This is something a lot of people miss, but if you pick up a grass plank and a weed stem and take it to a resource analyzer, you can indeed analyze both of them just for that extra bit of raw science and so you can build some new stuff with them. Tip 10.5, subscribe to Paraly5er to increase your chance of getting trinkets and gold cards. Tip number 11, use the grinder to grind weed stems for 8 plant fiber each. What you're going to do is cut down a bunch of weeds, then take them over to the grinder, and you can actually put them in for 8 plant fiber each, which is you can farm a load of plant fiber doing this. Definitely recommend it. Tip number 12, kill gnats easily by dropping meat slurry on the ground. This is a pretty obvious one. If you drop spoiled meat slurry, the gnats are actually attracted to it, so they'll all fly towards it. When you're trying to farm gnats, you drop a piece on the ground and you kill them all before they can eat it, because you don't want to tame them as a pet. Tip number 13, make an aphid farm using plant slurry. This is an obvious one. You can build a little farm, drop some plant slurry, and all the aphids will go towards it. This just makes it easy so that you can kill a bunch of them. This is especially good if you're trying to farm a gold card. Tip number 14, make a weevil farm using mushroom slurry. You can also use mushroom chunks or regular mushrooms, drop them all on the floor, and they'll all go towards it. This is again useful if you're trying to get the weevil gold card or if you need a lot of weevil meat and noses. Tip number 15, use the damage type weaknesses in the early game and elemental weaknesses in the late game. In the early game, you won't be able to get elemental weapons, so you want to use damage type weaknesses like chopping and stabbing against the enemies. Once you get to the late game, you're going to want to use weapons that are spicy, fresh, and salty to counter the enemy's weaknesses.
Tip 16. Get a pet for a free buff. The aphid is best as it reduces the stamina cost of sprinting.
Tip 17. Use the spinning wheel to craft crude rope cheaper. This is an obvious one, but if you use the crafting table, it actually costs 3 plant fiber to make crude rope, whereas if you use the spinning wheel, it's a one-to-one conversion. But you're probably going to need a lot of spinning wheels because it takes forever to spin it into crude rope. Tip number 18, move the pallets for faster transport. This is another obvious one. If you relocate pallets with planks or stems on the back, you can move a bunch at once instead of moving them 5 at a time. Tip number 19, Build near a tree so that you can use sap catchers. This is another obvious one. You can put these sap catchers on any tree in the game. So that includes the tree stump, the giant oak tree, and the fallen tree branch in the yard. I recommend you build near these because you're going to need a lot of sap catchers for a lot of sap to craft stuff like bandages. Tip 20. Cooking meat on the roasting spit refills the decay bar. If you didn't know, if your meat is about to decay, throw it on the roasting spit, and when it cooks, it will completely refresh the decay bar on the meat. Don't leave it on the spit though, because that doesn't work anymore. The meat now decays on the spit. Tip 21. Upgrade a gear to level 6 so that it only requires repair glue to repair. Now you might think going to level 6 is pointless, but it makes it so that you just need one repair glue to repair your gear. This means you don't have to keep farming different items across the entire map. You can just farm one item and then convert it to repair glue to repair your gear every single time. Tip 22. Carry a stack of repair glue with you at all times. If all your gear is level 6 and higher, then you can just carry a stack of repair glue, and whenever something breaks, you can repair it instantly. This means you don't have to carry a bunch of different items around to repair all the different things you have on you. Tip 23. Carry a stack of bandages with you at all time. This is another obvious one, but Grounded doesn't have passive regen. In order to get regeneration, you need to use bandages, so you're going to want to carry a stack of bandages with you at all times in your inventory. Tip 24. Cut down large mushrooms for mushroom chunks. This is one a few people miss in the game, and it took me a while to even realise this was a thing, and this gives you mushroom chunks, which you need to analyse, and you can also grind for mushroom slurry to make the mushroom bricks in the game. Tip 25. Use mushroom bricks for walls. This is because it stacks in your inventory, so you can just carry a bunch of them at once to build a bunch of walls, instead of carrying the grass planks around, which you can only carry 5 of. Tip 26. Use clay or pebblet foundations for floors. This is because, again, they stack in your inventory, so you can get a bunch of clay all in your inventory at once, and then just build out a massive platform. Tip 27. Make 2 dew collectors for each person so that you never dehydrate. So a general rule of thumb here is when you're playing a game of Grounded, you want 2 dew collectors per person in the lobby. So if you're playing a 4-player game, I recommend 8 dew collectors. This is so that you can fill up your canteen and make sure your character doesn't dehydrate. Tip 28. Upgrade your lean-to to a bed for buffs when waking up. If you didn't know, the bed gives you buffs when sleeping. So upgrade to a bed as soon as possible. Tip 29. Trash items instead of dropping them on the ground. Now, I know what you're thinking, trashing items means they're gone forever. Yes, but if you drop them on the ground, it can actually create a lot of lag in the game. This is already a pretty big problem in Grounded, with the ants dropping items all over the map, so make sure, if you ever see items, don't drop them, just trash them instead. Number 30. Always carry brat bursts. Now, this is an important one if you're early in the game. You're going to want to carry a stack of brat bursts with you. Once you've gotten to the end of the game and you know you don't need any more brat bursts, obviously there's no point in carrying them anymore. But you will need probably about 20 brat bursts in order to get all of the cracked rocks across the map. So I'd recommend you carry a stack of them with you at all times. Tip 31. Don't use heal basses. They heal enemies. Now obviously heal basses can be good if you're playing with 2 or more players because you can heal multiple people. But if you're playing solo, I really don't recommend heal basses because they do the same amount of healing as a beefy slop, but they heal the enemies, like I say, and you don't want to heal the enemies. Tip 32. Use your milk molars to unlock 5 mutation slots first. This is personal preference for me, but I would instantly use milk molars to get 5 mutations because having those 3 extra mutations is huge, especially early in the game. Tip 33. You only need to build in one place to get into the Moldorc Castle. This is another important one to know. You can actually parkour to the majority of the Moldorc Castle. The only place where you need to build is on the final rock. You need 1 clay ramp in order to get in. But again, just carry clay with you as it's easy to build and it's just in your inventory. Tip 34. Break the rotten food in the trash can to stop gas mask breaking. This is another one that's important. When you're in the trash can, just break all of the rotten food that's around because it actually does tank your gas mask durability. But if you break it, it stops your gas mask from breaking. Tier 35. Weapon tier is more important than weakness. This just means if you have a tier 3 termite axe and you have a tier 2 red ant club that's maybe fresh and you're fighting an enemy that's weak to fresh, I'd recommend you use the termite axe. Purely because tier 3 weapons are so much more stronger than tier 2. It's the same with tier 2 versus tier 1. Tier 2 are just so much stronger than tier 1. you're always going to want to use the higher tier weapons. Simple as that. Tip 36. Use bombs in the Broodmother fight. This is especially if it's your first time fighting the Broodmother. I recommend you take bombs in and drop them when she summons in the Spiderlings or the Orbweaver Juniors, as this will kill a majority of them if you know how to use them. Tip 37. Learn to perfect block. This is a really important one. If you're melee combating in Grounded, which 99% of you should be, use the perfect block. Learn the enemy attack patterns and learn to perfect block. You're going to need to do this to get into the late game of Grounded. I especially recommend it with the spiders, because once you get to the late game fighting the Widow, it's really difficult to cheese these enemies, and you don't want to do it. It's boring. Tip 38. Get close to the antlions in the pits in order to kill them. This is an obvious one, but when you're fighting the pit antlions, you actually don't want to kill them from range. You want to stay really close to them, because it makes it easier to perfect block their attacks and to dodge their attacks as well. Tip 39. After killing pit antlions, loot them, because it opens up a secret tunnel. This is another obvious one that some people might not know exists, but when you kill the pit antlions and loot them, it unlocks secret tunnels in the game which have a load of really good loot in them. Tip 40. Do Burgle's quests as often as possible. This is especially important for those in the early game. You're going to need to do a lot of Burgle quests, even if you collect all his chips, for the extra raw science, so that you can unlock everything in the store. So I definitely recommend you get as many quests done as possible. Tip 41. Don't plug the haze unless you want to fight the infected wolf spider. There is almost no advantages in the game to plugging the haze. The only thing it does is add the infected wolf spider as an enemy. So if you're going to plug it, make sure you're ready to fight them, as there is one under the oak tree where a lot of people build their bases. Tip 42. Run away from explosive attacks. But when you're fighting things like infected enemies, such as the infected weevil, infected larva, infected wolf spider, you can't perfect block the explosive attacks, so you just need to run away. You have no choice. Tip 43. Quartzite rocks don't respawn, so break them when you see them. You want to get every single one of these whenever you see it. Same with the marble. Just collect them all. They do stack to 99, so they won't cause you too many problems in your inventory space. Tip 44. Build around the mixers to make them easier to defend. This is an obvious one, but a lot of people don't know that you can just build around the mixers in the game. Just build around them to protect them, you know? Tip 45. Stand on this back wall when fighting Schmector if you want to avoid the lasers. This is a useful one as it just avoids the laser attack and stops you from getting killed. Tip 46. Granola bars don't respawn. Personally, I just collect them and put them all in a chest. I know some people eat them, but just be careful. They don't respawn. They're one-time use. Tip 47. Collect mussel sprouts as often as possible for smoothies so you can heal. Now, the mussel sprouts can only be gotten from the pond lab, and you can't farm them in any way. It spawns exactly 30 every single time, so I recommend you collect these as often as possible so you can make a bunch of smoothies. Tip 48. Build by the oak tree. In my opinion, it's the best place to build. It's in the center of the map. You can make sap catchers. It's the only place that has acorns, which you need for a bunch of different building items. I highly recommend you build here. Tip 49. Gnats go to the lamps at night. The gnats are indeed attracted to light, so when it turns nighttime, they all go to the garden lamps. The best one to go to kill them is actually the one by the oak tree, as you can get to this one without building. Tip 50. Rockcracker actually works for farming clay. This is another one that's cool to know. If you're trying to farm clay, you can use the Rockcracker mutation and it'll break much easier. Tip 51. Break web sacks for tier 2 bug parts early on. This is another obvious one. If you break the web sacks, it does obviously spawn spiderlings, but it can give you a bunch of useful tier 2 parts, like the stink bug parts and the ladybug heads. Tip 52. Analyze plant fiber, sap, and pebbler at the very start of the game, as it unlocks the best recipes, and it lets you make a crafting table and a bunch of basic tools. Tip 53. Punch flowers for petals. If you didn't know, you can actually punch some of the flowers in the map and it'll drop petals from them. Tip 54. You can't die of fall damage if you have your health maxed out. Another important one to know, once you've maxed your health with milk molars, it doesn't matter how high you fall from, as long as your health is maxed to begin with, you can't die. There is a cap on damage from falling. Tip 55. Hold the dandelion tuft a couple of seconds before hitting the ground. Now, in 1.1, they've actually got nerfed a little bit because you have to hold it for longer, but just pull the dandelion tuft before you hit the ground, and you'll take a lot less damage. Tip 56. Watch out for the koi fish. Ah! Tip 57. Almost everything can be parkoured to. Always try to parkour before you resort to building. There's only 1 or 2 things in the game that you can't parkour to, including the top of the sandcastle in the game, but everything else you can pretty much parkour to it, so you're going to have to look for a route. Tip 58, use the wafter to farm gold cards. This is another great tip. You can use the wafter to spawn in a bunch of different raids, including black ox beetles, bombardiers, and fire ants, and you want to use this to farm the gold cards. Tip 59, build high up to avoid raids from most enemies. What you want to do is build high up. If you're in the oak tree, I recommend building high up around the trunk. This is because the only enemies that will be able to raid you are enemies like the bees and mosquitoes because they fly. Any ground enemies shouldn't be able to get to you. They'll only be able to break the staircase up to your base. Tip 60, practice on orb weavers and wolf spiders if you're trying to kill the black widow and the broodmother. Obviously, the orb weavers and wolf spiders have the same attack patterns, so once you've learned how to perfect block these, it should become much easier to kill the black widow and the broodmother. Tip 61, twinkling shells in the pipe. This is an obvious one. There are actually scarabs in the pipe in the undershed. If you need twinkling shells in order to progress your game and upgrade your gear, this is where you find them. Tip 62, shinobi sneeze and flares are useless. Don't bother getting the shinobi sneeze or the flares in the game. Both of them are completely useless and very expensive to craft. Tip 63, use garden patches to farm mushrooms and other stuff. If you find yourself needing a bunch of mushrooms or grass or sprigs or clovers, you can farm these using the garden patches in the game. Tip 64, go to the fallen branch for lots of sprigs. As you can see on the map, just come to this area right here, and there is a bunch of sprigs in this area. There's about 250, I think, so if you need a bunch of them, just come here. Tip 65, collect all of the rotten items in the game and analyze them for more brain power. This includes the rotten weapons, the rotten bee armor, and the rotten roly-poly armor. When you analyze these, it will give you brain power, and it'll also give you a little bit of free raw science, so you definitely want to do this.
Tip 66. Scanning items gives you free raw science, so make sure to scan everything. Tip 67. Leveling up brain power gives you free raw science too, and it increases with each level of brain power.
Tip 68. Put a water collector under a juice carton and it collects the juice. If you need juice or you live near a juice box, stick a water collector under it and it'll actually collect all the juice for you. Tip 69. Nice. If you're within 20 centimeters of a chest, it'll let you use its contents when crafting. This was recently doubled by the devs in 1.1, so you can make your storage rooms even bigger than before, and you can quick deposit to these up to 20 centimeters away as well. Tip 70. Discover as many landmarks as possible so that you can upgrade your tier of Natural Explorer. This is really important if you're trying to traverse the yard. Natural Explorer is a must-have mutation. Tip 71. Get the 4-leaf clover and use coup de grace in order to stun the enemies. This is useful for critting the enemies. It also does stun them when you crit them, and it's good if you're using a fast attack speed weapon like a dagger. Tip 72. Get Thor's Pendant. This is one of the best trinkets in the game, very useful for fighting enemies. I highly recommend it. Tip 73. Use a sour staff to kill moths. This one's self-explanatory. If you're really good with a sour staff and leading your attacks, the moth will just not get a single attack off and it'll make it really easy. Tip 74. Don't run from a wolf spider. They always catch you. This is another important one. If a wolf spider sees you, you can't run away. Unless you're going up and vertically stopping them from getting to you, they will always catch you. It's as simple as that. Tip 75, if you're building a staircase, use clay ramps. Some people will build staircases to certain areas of the map, like to get to the moth on top of Moldorc Castle. If you're going to do this, use clay because you can carry it in your inventory and it'll be much, much quicker. Tip 76. If you're trying to build directly upwards, you can actually pillar up using clay foundations and pillars. This is the cheapest way to pillar up in the game if for some reason you just want to go vertically upwards. Tip 77. Chop down husky weeds, not burrs or dandelions, if you're trying to farm weed stems. This is self-explanatory, but if you break the husky weeds, they drop a lot more weed stems than burrs or dandelions do, so it's just much quicker if you're farming for them. Tip 78. The Black Widow Milk Molar can actually be gotten without fighting the Black Widow. This is a secret that not a lot of people know, but what you're going to need to do is grab a bunch of grass planks, get into where the Milk Molar is, and if you just spam them on the ground and jump, you'll eventually be able to jump up and get the molar. You can just then leave without killing the widow if you want. Tip 79. Turn on and use the surveyor scanner. You can turn on the surveyor scanner in the hedge, and it allows you to scan items all across the map, which all are really, really useful. And it's a really useful thing to have so that you can find the items whenever you need them. Tip 80. Notes only spawn in labs and field stations and on one mixer. Now, in the game, the data items, you have the notes and the tapes. The tapes can spawn anywhere, but the notes only spawn in labs, field stations, and on one singular mixer in the game. So if you're looking for a specific note, then you know it has to be in one of these 3 places. Tip 81, the Spider Fang Dagger and Bone Dagger can be used underwater to break soggy roots. There's tier 2 roots that you need to break in certain parts of the map, and in order to break them, you need a tier 2 dagger. Both the Spider Fang and the Bone Dagger work, if you didn't know. Tip 82, you only need tier 1 of every mutation for 100%. You don't need to max out and get tier 3 or stage 3 of every mutation. You only need the first stage, and if you're trying to 100% the game. Tip 83, you can use the camera mode at nighttime. Now this is important, especially if you're trying to do parkour. Go into the camera mode in the game, and then go to the settings and change it back to daytime. You'll be able to see exactly where you are, and you can see the path you need to take. Tip 84, stuffed fireflies for lighting. This is a weird one, but if you didn't know, if you place down a stuffed firefly blueprint, it'll actually give off light even before you build it. So if you're trying to get a lot of lighting, just spam a bunch of these down. Tip 85, recover backpacks. If your backpack gets lost, or you can't be bothered going to find it, you can use this recover backpack feature, and it'll bring it all the way back to the kid's case at spawn. Tip 86, loot all on the roasting spit. If you didn't know, when you press X on the roasting spit, you can then press the left bumper and it'll take all the meat off at once instead of trying to look at specific parts of the meat to pick it up. Tip 87, loot all on the jerky rack. When you open up the inventory of the jerky rack, you can also press the left bumper to take it all off at once instead of looking at the individual pieces and picking them up. Tip 88, use bombs to harvest clovers, grass, and dry grass. If you drop a bomb in a field of clovers, it'll break every single one of them, so you don't have to use an axe to chop them all down. Tip 89, bring a repair tool with you when you're doing mixers. A repair tool can actually be used to repair all of the walls while you're doing the mixer, so that you can stop the enemies from getting in. You'll be able to use this between the waves of enemies in order to repair to stop you from losing. Tip 90. Change the bounce pad angle. You can change the angle of the bounce pad so that you can bounce in specific directions. Tip 91. Change armor stands pose. You can also change the poses of the armor stands so that you can get some cool, unique looking armor stands. Tip 92. Hit the web sacks or throw pebblets to attract Black Widowlings. If you're trying to fight the Black Widowlings without attracting the Black Widow, you can hit the web sacks with a tier 3 axe and it'll actually cause the Widowlings to come towards you. Also, you could just throw a pebblet at the Widowling and it'll cause them to aggro you as well. Tip 93. Use the wafter to farm Bombardier parts for the Broodmother BLT. If you use the wafter and use boiling glands in it, you can actually farm Bombardier parts and you will make back enough Bombardier parts and boiling glands to keep using it infinitely to farm them. Tip 94. Use the wafter to farm fire ant heads for the Mantis Kebab. Again, if you put the fire ant parts in the wafter, you can infinitely farm them, and eventually you'll get a bunch of fire ant heads to make a bunch of mantis kebabs. Tip 95, avoid the Black Widow in the undershed. If you didn't know, you can actually avoid this Black Widow by doing a little bit of parkour, going along the pipe and then jumping across, and you don't have to go down there to fight the Widow. Tip 96, killing an enemy in the water means it doesn't drop parts. People used to use this as a cheese to get parts without actually killing the enemy themselves, but if it happens now, like with a wolf spider, it'll just say the enemy loot was waterlogged and you don't get anything. Tip 97, buy all of the scanners so that you don't miss any molars, science, or scabbies. You can use the science shop to buy a bunch of scanners for things. Even if you know the locations, it's worth buying just in case you've missed something when you walk past. Tip 98, if you are out of bombs, you can use Truffle Tussle to break cracked rocks. Use Truffle Tussle to hit enemies. It can actually break cracked rocks, so you can use it instead of a bomb. Tip 99, use a map to track your milk molars. I'd recommend you download a map off of the Grounded wiki and tick off the milk molars as you go, so you can keep track of which ones you still need. Tip 100, make sure you loot bodies for gold cards. Some people don't know this, but when you kill an enemy, you need to have peeped it and then every time you loot the body, you have a 1% chance of getting the gold. You have to loot the body or you'll never get the gold card. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like on the video. I hope you appreciate these 100 tips and hopefully you learned something new today. I'll see you in the next Grounded video. Have a great rest of your day.